So what I've done is, you know, I haven't invented anything new. What I've done is I've used historical references, experimental archaeology, past archaeological finds, past journals, ledgers, and things of that nature to put together a system of wilderness living, if that's bushcraft, if that's what you want to call it. That's very easy to understand, very easy to remember, and it kind of tells you what the basics are of the things you need. And really, one of the things that we struggle with nowadays, I think, in the community is everybody wants to know what kit should I carry, you know, and everybody wants to know kit, and there's so much kit around here that you can, I mean, outfit an army with the kit in this place. So what I want you to understand is I want to break things down a little bit to a more basic and essential level, so that you understand that primitive peoples and ancient cultures didn't need all the frivolous things that we need today. I'm not saying that we should be making fire with sticks and we should be gutting deer with rocks. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if we understand the categories of items that were important to these people, and we can match that to modern or natural materials, then we're 5 steps ahead of the game. Because if you figure they didn't need it, why do we need it? All right? So let's start off real quick with a discussion about the 5 C's and just step back in time about 5,000 years and look at Oats of the Iceman. Is everybody familiar with Oats of the Iceman? Okay, for those of you that aren't raising your hand, Oats of the Iceman was a nomadic traveler, possibly hunter-gatherer, possibly farmer on the move to somewhere else, who was traveling alone in the Alps on the border of, I believe it was Italy and Austria, and he was killed by an arrow by someone else. But the fact that he was traveling alone, presumably, and the fact that he was found mummified 5,000 years later with all of his goods that he was carrying intact, gives us a window into what was important to that lone traveler for his livelihood, his survival, and his whatever he had to do to live over the course of his journey. And by looking at that, we can learn a lot. And what I've done is I've looked at that, and then I've looked at things like what did the pioneers of the 18th century, the Spanish explorers of the 17th century, and peoples like that were also nomadic in nature because they were traveling over great distances. People like the Lewis and Clark expedition, what did they take with them? And I've looked at all of these things and kind of assimilated them into a database of sorts to break things down into categories of items that they felt were the most important. And it also relates back to, if you look at trade ledgers from the late 1700s and early 1800s in America, the items that were first traded to native people. American history gives us a lot closer window to things than European history because, let's face it, Europe was way ahead of the Americans. They had the Vikings had flint steel technology in the 10th century. But yet in the 16th century, when first European contact came to the Americas, they were in the Stone Age. And that's a huge span of time that Europe was so far ahead of the Americas with their material culture. Utility blade. It's no different to me than this with the disposable blade, except it's concrete. And it's got a little bit finer lines on it so that I can use it for processing fish. That's one of my favorite knives to process fish because the blade's only about that long, so I don't have to worry about doing this. I can just go split that dude right open and yank the guts out. Go. That's a great fish blade. And it's made that the front of that blade was taken from the War 2000, which was made game. That's what that knife designed it to. And that's what we have to understand when we go to buy a knife. You know, I get a lot of people ask me, what knife are you gonna, if I want to buy one more knife, what do I buy? You gonna buy one or buy that one? Right? But if you're gonna buy one, I want to buy more knife because I guess
whatever the weight was required. I'll answer questions at the end, okay? If I could just waffle on, otherwise I've got to forget what I'm doing, alright? I'll answer your questions at the end, if I can. Okay, so water is essential, so on your pack, on your belt, as soon as you get down that water bottle, you start your rationing. Now on the belt, again, we had a magazine, weapon, ammunition, and an escape pouch. The escape pouch so big it contained a small half of a mess tin, and in it you got as many meat blocks as you could. Okay, high sort of quality or nutritious food, soup powders, oxo cubes, York brew, and half a pack of hexamine, and lots of matches. And people say, how long will that last you? It lasts you until you get rescued. So you cover the time on it, again you eke it out as long as you can. So that's on that person again. In our pockets we have a map and a compass.
After this talk. My interest in bushcraft really began in 1972 when I was given at Christmas a book on animal tracks and signs, and I went out, and in those days we used to have snow in the south of England, and I went out and I found fox tracks and I started following them. When the snow melted, I continued to follow them in the mud, and when the mud dried I continued to try to follow them then too. And at that time it was rather difficult. Still difficult, 45 years later. I hope in a few years' time to have learned a little bit about tracking. It's something I'm still studying. It's an amazing subject. At about the same time, at the school that I went to, I had to take part in lessons in judo. It wasn't voluntary, it was a compulsory lesson. Everybody did judo. It was Saturday school. Can you imagine how miserable Saturday school was? I can still remember one term when the day began with double maths, followed by Latin, then judo, thank you, and then 2 more Latin lessons, Latin conducted by the headmaster, which I hated with a passion. So judo was very much an escape for me. And the man who taught the judo was a very special man. His name was Kingsley Hopkins, and he belonged to an amazing club in London called the Bushcraft, which is the oldest club outside of Japan. And he had been taught by a man called Gunji Koizumi, who brought judo to the UK from Japan and was taught himself by the man who started judo. So when he taught the subject, he didn't teach it as a sport that we know today. He taught it as a way of life, as a martial art. I can still remember the first time I stepped onto the judo mat, clear in my mind, full of excitement, just as everybody else, wearing this strange pyjama suit that smelled so strongly of starch. If you've ever done judo or martial art, you know that smell. It lives with you forever. And the first thing we were told, judo is a way of life. And in many ways, the bushcraft that I practice today is my study of judo, the gentle way.
Alright, so anyway, anybody that... yeah. Alright, so for anybody that, I'm sure anybody that's in here that paid obviously knows who I am, or you wouldn't have paid to see me, because I wouldn't pay to see somebody that knows me. But I'm sure you guys are smarter than that, right? I'm not sure I would have paid to see me either, but that's beside the point. So I'm Dave Canterbury with the Pathfinder School, and my school is located in southeast Ohio, which is about halfway down the U.S. and about 1/3 of the way over. Our climate is very similar to what you have here. The plants and things of that nature and the trees are also very similar to what you have here. They're not exact, but they're pretty close. And what I found is that, just on that note, there's kind of a lateral line that goes across the U.S. or across around the world. And as long as you stay in that certain latitude, a lot of the plants and trees will be very similar. And I think that's with the UK. A lot of stuff you have over here that I've noticed as far as medicinal plants, edible plants, and trees are very similar to what we have in the U.S. So if you ever wonder if things that are taught in the U.S. will cross over to the UK or the other way around, they absolutely will. All right, so at the Pathfinder, I'm doing this introduction, which I probably don't need to do, but I'm doing it anyway because it's on here, and I'll get confused if I don't. At the Pathfinder School, we teach short-term emergency survival. We teach pioneering and scouting skills. We teach modern trapping, and we teach blacksmithing. And those are the main things that we teach at the Pathfinder School. And we teach about 2 classes every month, about 9 months out of the year. And I teach 95% of them myself as the lead instructor. I have 11 instructors that work for me, but I try to be at every class. that I can. Unless something happens where I just can't be there, then they take care of it for me. But the blacksmithing classes and the trapping classes, I'm the only one that teaches that. I have 4 books out currently: Bushcraft 101, Advanced Bushcraft, Bushcraft Trapping, Gathering, and Cooking Food, and my newest book is Bushcraft First Aid, which hasn't released in the UK yet. If you pre-order it on Amazon, probably about a week before you get it. The UK is about a week behind the USA, and it just released in the US. I write for Backwoodsman Magazine, I write for Bushcraft Magazine, and I write for American Frontiersman Magazine, as well as Trapper's World Magazine. Okay, so here we go. The man who goes afoot prepared to camp anywhere and in any weather is the most independent fellow on earth. That right there says everything to me, all right? If you can walk out into the woods and you're prepared to just stop, drop, and roll, no matter what happens, that's total independence in the wilderness. Because you don't have to worry about anything other than an injury that would cause you to have to worry about getting a medevac. Other than that, you're smoothing it, okay? So what we want to do is we want to figure out what's the formula for that. Because that's where we want to be. That's where I want to be. I want to be able to just take my bag, go out into the woods, and whether I want to stay for a day, 2 days a week, whether I want to hunt, fish,